God's plan.
Yes.
This is God's plan. Jesus spends time with his disciples in this text to teach and to explain his mission in Jerusalem. He is apparently alone with them, and as they secretly travel through Galilee, Jesus seeks to prepare his followers for a major shift in their expectations of the Messiah. They were looking forward to the establishment of the kingdom through the overthrow of the Roman Empire. They expected Jesus to become that mighty warrior and king of Israel. They were well versed in the cultural and historic traditions concerning the Messiah. So Jesus takes time to explain the Father's will concerning his rejection, his sufferings, his death, and his resurrection. This was an important moment for Jesus and his disciples, regardless of what the 12 knew about Jesus up to this point. It was necessary for them to understand and to perceive God's plan. It was about to unfold before their very eyes. They needed to know that God was doing something different in and through Jesus to deliver mankind. They needed to know that Jesus had come to fulfill the Father's will and purpose. Oh yes, even unto death on a cross. The disciples required time to absorb Jesus' teaching regarding his fate and the establishment of the kingdom. The news that Jesus shares with his disciples seems to cut across the grain of the disciples, of their hope and their faith. In Mark chapter 8, after Peter had declared Jesus to be the Christ, Mark says that Jesus began teaching the disciples that the Son of Man must suffer many things. Peter reacted to the speech by rebuking Jesus. Peter expressed his sharp disapproval and criticism of Jesus' message. The 12 were thrown off guard by such a prediction of suffering and death for the Messiah. So Peter led the charge to correct Jesus right then and there. While looking at the disciples, Jesus rebukes Peter by saying, "Get thee behind me, Satan, for thou savorest not the things of God, but the things of men." Peter is thus rebuked for his lack of understanding, for his hostility toward God's plan, and for pushing his own agenda against God's will. Peter wanted Jesus to be that powerful, ruthless king who would lead the revolution for Israel's sake. Peter's motivation conflicted with God's course of action. The 12 were seemingly not prepared to receive the Son of Man message from Jesus. This was a bitter pill to swallow for the disciples. It defied everything that they had come to believe about the Messiah. They were not ready for a Messiah who would suffer and die on a cross. They did not like what they heard and did not understand it. In his message to the disciples, Jesus refers to himself as the Son of Man. This self-designation makes the point about God's plan for him. As Son of Man, Jesus came to serve and to give his life as a ransom for many. The Son of Man title emphasizes Jesus' humanity, his submission to God's will, and his humiliation or sufferings. As Son of Man, Jesus is the human representative, the one who is sent by God, the servant and the man who operates on God's behalf. In Mark chapter 9, Jesus makes the second attempt to explain his mission as the Son of Man. It is essentially the same message as before. Jesus gives the 12 another opportunity to hear from him on this matter, to ask any questions that they might have, and to understand the road ahead. Jesus wants the disciples to know his identity and his purpose. He wants them to understand his full commitment to doing God's will. He is the Son of Man who is subject to the Father. He is the Son of Man because he plays an important role in bringing men back to God. He is the Son of Man because he is the thrust of God's redemptive plan. At times, it is painfully obvious that there is some confusion about Jesus' identity and purpose today. Some focus on Jesus as only the teacher of ethical behavior and practices. Some only focus on Jesus as the compassionate man who went around doing good things. Some portray Jesus as the father of a prosperity and materialistic philosophy. Some still see Jesus only as Mary's little boy. They even pray to Mary to get Jesus to do something for them. Y'all hear me today? Some think of Jesus as the one who sets his own agenda independent of the Father. Some define Jesus as the face of their racist and oppressive ideologies. Yes, there are many mixed messages about Jesus today. Jesus sets the record straight about himself with his disciples. In spite of what they had thought about him, it was time for them to get an understanding. From this point on, the disciples must submit to God's plan. Jesus declares the plan by saying that the Son of Man is delivered into the hands of men. This plan is determined according to God's will. The Son of Man is to be delivered or literally handed over to men. God allows evil men to carry out their agenda against Jesus. Instead of being taken by wicked people, Jesus is handed over or delivered up by God himself. On one occasion, Jesus speaks authoritatively and says, "No man takes my life, but I lay it down." Oh yeah, Jesus is delivered to men's hands according to the perfect will of God. After being delivered over to men, Jesus goes on to say that they shall kill the Son of Man. These people and the evil rulers will achieve their purpose. They will unleash their fury and their anger upon him. They will show their true character and beliefs through their own actions against the Son of Man. They will show their brazen rejection of God himself through the rejection of God's Son. Isaiah predicted that the Son of Man would suffer like this. He says, when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. He is despised and rejected of men, a man of sorrows and acquainted with grief. and we hid, as it were, our faces from him. He was despised and rejected, and we esteemed him not.
Yes, sir.
Jesus confirmed that he will be handed over and killed according to the scriptures. They shall kill him, even as Isaiah goes on to say, he was cut off out of the land of the living.